Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of data science. We bring the best minds in data, software engineering, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now here are your hosts, Frank Lavinia and Andy Leonard.
Hello and welcome back to Data Driven, the show where we focus on data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And today we have, a bit of a special report and breaking news. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing pretty well, Frank. I'm afraid to ask how you're doing.
Oh, I've had better days. I've had a few worse ones, too.
True.
So for those not following the drama on Twitter and Facebook and my blog, my database that backed up my WordPress implementation it's gone. Summarily deleted.
Man.
And still tracking things down. My site went offline sometime around September 12th. And I just thought it was a normal kind of hiccup with the way Azure talks to... it turns out, for those that don't know, is that for a while, the only way to run a MySQL solution on Azure was to use a service called ClearDB, and they basically were database as a service. And you would get basically a free kind of simple tier for that out of that. So you didn't really have to interact with ClearDB. So generally what would happen is you just reboot the service and everything's fine. And it would happen every once in a while. So this time I kept rebooting and it didn't work. So I submitted an Azure ticket, and the first reaction I got from the Azure support team was, this is a ClearDB problem. So I wrote ClearDB, and they wrote me back kind of just before I went to bed, and I'm kind of wishing I didn't see it. They basically said that my data was, first they pointed the finger at Azure, saying that they got a group delete command and basically wipe out my database.
Ouch.
And then he also told me that, and they can't find a backup of it, which he thought was unusual. So fast forward to sometime late this morning or early this morning as I get an email from the VP of Finance or something like that from there. And she had a very chastising tone that, if you don't pay your bill, this is going to happen. And you haven't paid your bill in 2 years.
I thought this was a free service.
So did I. So, and I'm willing to pay for it, but tell me. And, no email, no notifications, nothing at all to indicate that I was on the wrong with this. And she threw back in my face. So about a year ago, my site was offline, and I, went kind of through this rigmarole again. And then the people at ClearDB was like, you haven't paid your bill. And I'm like, I don't have a bill.
Right.
And they said, finally I got to somebody who knew what they were doing. They said, this was a bulk delete. They were trying to monetize things, and it was a mistake.
Wow. Okay.
And I was like, okay, one hiccup, every couple of years. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But to have the VP of Finance kind of throw it in my face, like, really? So this drama is still unfolding. And I, needless to say, I was like, it's a family show, but I was PO'd. Like I use words that I cannot use in a family show. Because, but then again, my first thought was, this is a terrible week for this to happen. And for those of you who don't know, I narrowly escaped getting out of the World Trade Center area on 9/11. So, that's kind of raw. And a year ago, I guess yesterday, I got my notification that I was being laid off from Microsoft.
Yeah.
And so this has been a 1, 2, 3 punch. And in the second thought, it's kind of like, you know what? If all the disasters are going to happen at once, it might as well, right? I mean, and it's kind of, and then I stopped and I thought, the people who lost, I say I lost everything.
Yeah.
My kids are healthy. I have my health. My wife is healthy. got a roof over my head. There's a lot of people who are hurting from the hurricane areas,
Right.
that don't have any of that. And I've had a chance to kind of, I'm sure I'm going to go through the phases of grief, right?
Yes.
And, I was already basically begging with the people at ClearDB, just find my data.
Right.
There's also somebody from Microsoft support also kind of trying to track this down, because I may not be the only one this ever happens to, because if I had no idea that I had to pay money for a free service,
Yeah.
this is probably going to be, if not a problem already, I can imagine this being a problem.
Yeah.
And because they said they shut it off after 2 years and obliterate it. So if you have a database, if you do any business with ClearDB, double check everything. And if you think you might possibly not be doing business with ClearDB, because it's not immediately clear when you set up, because I followed the template to set up a WordPress site.
Okay.
And I thought I was, I thought I was smug, basically. I thought I have everything in the cloud, like nothing could go wrong.
Yeah. That makes sense. I get it, Frank. I totally do. And I want to, I want to remind folks that are listening, because I know we're going to put this out there, that that I admire your transparency on it. I mean, you've been very, very open, very honest about how you felt, even when I would consider saying you're smug to be non-flattering. And I don't agree with you, by the way. I don't think you were being smug. I think you thought that you had this taken care of, and you did. It wasn't an issue until a day ago, and then all of a sudden, it just your data disappeared. And goodness, I can see myself going through all of the steps you went through. It's like, wow, that's interesting. Why did that happen?
I guess the moral of the story is that maybe it's not if you're paranoid about your data security. Are you paranoid enough?
That is a good moral.
So I'm part of a podcaster group, part of the podcast training I did, and I posted on there because SoundCloud is kind of in the throes of, depending on who you believe, staging for a comeback or the throes of a death spiral.
Oh wow!
And a lot of people host their podcasts in SoundCloud.
Oh no!
In fact, a lot of people. We almost ended up in SoundCloud. Now I think we published to SoundCloud automatically, but that's not our primary system. And but not that long ago, I thought, well, good thing I'm not in SoundCloud. I'm in Azure.
Exactly.
I'm back-ended by some serious engineering, and while I am back-ended by some serious engineering, was not immediately clear was there's a third party there, and that third party, let's just say they have issues, and certainly lack of communication.
Well, and that would be my thing. I mean, here's what I would expect. I would expect to get a note. So, and maybe I'm expecting too much, but I'm thinking of this more like a utility. I'm thinking about it like my telephone or my electricity, and I owe money, and maybe I'm behind in the bills, and that's happening, and I'm clearly I'm at fault from the company's perspective, and I expect if they send me several notifications, and they'll say, the last one will be, if you don't pay, we're going to turn off your phone or your electricity on this day. And I would have expected CloudDB to do the same thing for you. And it sounds like either they didn't do it or something else happened and prevented the message from reaching you.
It's what I think happened, and it's ClearDB.
I'm sorry.
CloudDB. I don't want to trash some poor company that's like CloudDB.
ClearDB.
So this is how you remember it, Andy. ClearDB. They'll clear you out.
I had a mouthful of water. Now I have a nose full of water. I hope you're happy.
And a messy keyboard and stuff like that. So this is what I think happened is that because this is a cautionary tale for a lot of things, and I think to quote someone in your past that one day we'll look back on this and laugh, but that day is not today.
That's true.
The integration was so tight, you really had to pay attention that you were calling out through a third-party service.
Interesting.
And for one reason or the other, that third-party service did not have my contact information.
Oh, really?
Right.
So they may have been trying to notify you, but they
maybe it went to a dead letter box or whatever. Or the thing that's also disappointing is I submitted. They found me. They knew who I was because they threw the ticket that I opened up last year in my face.
Yeah.
They could have used the email from that. Like, hey, going to shut you off.
Yeah. There's a word for that. Data into something.
So
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It stinks. Right?
It really does. It sucks. There's no other way to say it other than it sucks.
Yeah.
And it's just, it is what it is. I've survived a lot worse, as you know.
You have.
The thing that kind of like punched me like in the gut at first was, the year. So I started the website in 1995, right? But I started the blog, this iteration of the blog in 2004. Okay. So in the span of 2004 to 2012, or till today, the 2012 date I'll get to in a minute. I moved to Richmond. I got into .NET. I got into presenting. I became an MVP. I met my wife. I had my kids. My father died. Like all these like major life events have happened since then. And, 2012 comes into point because I was actually for the longest time running a very old version of .text as my blog engine. In 2012, I ported it to Orchard, which was a very messy project. But I actually had better backups of this cloud of ClearDB than ClearDB. So I actually found that backup within like an hour.
Wow.
So I have the blog ML file, which is blog ML is basically a standard XML format for blog posts. So I have that from roughly 2004 to sometime in 2012. So it's okay. And I write most of my blog posts in Windows Live Writer or the Open Live Writer.
Right.
So I have the files. They're just scattered to the winds.
Sure.
So I could reassemble it.
Yeah.
But then that becomes, well, as you know, there's a lot of projects that we've got going on. It's like, do I really want to focus on the past?
Yeah.
Or do I want to work on the future? And that's a deep philosophical question right there.
Yeah, I know which way you're leaning because I'd lean the same way.
Right. All that stuff that I wrote, me talking about my father getting sick and all that and kind of the I have that data, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's a chance to kind of reboot, I suppose, start anew.
It is. And I mean, what comes, what I'm thinking about here is as I'm listening to you reason through this. And I know you are reasoning through it because it just happened earlier today.
Yeah, folks, we're just over 12 hours of me finding this out.
Right. Yeah, I got you forwarded me the email. There was about four or five emails deep, the chain, and I was reading it this morning. I woke up very early this morning. I don't know why, but I got up around, I think it was 3:18 a.m. Eastern. I get up early, but that's early for me. And I was checking some email and I saw one from Frank, so of course I opened it. And I'm reading this and I was like, oh my gosh, I almost cried, Frank. It was, because I know what you've got, on there, and I know you'll put it back, especially the 9/11 related stuff and the stuff about your dad. And, I've been reading your blog for years. And, so I get that, and I also get, what I was thinking about there, and I didn't want to go too deep into that, but what I was thinking about was, what's the value of the long tail? And I think that it diminishes over time. And I bet your stats would back that up. That
Right,
fewer
and
and
that's
fewer
the thing.
people.
I'm sorry, cut
That's
you
okay.
off, Andy.
No, go ahead.
That's the thing, right? How many people are hitting my site now to find out about the latest news about Silverlight 4?
Right.
Or this wonderful thing called the Windows Phone, right?
Right.
Not a lot of people are hitting that,
Right.
So it's kind of like, and all the stuff I've done in the last year, I mean, I have those, they're all basically in Windows Live Writer files on one of two computers.
Good.
I have that.
Okay.
And, I might even have backups of Windows Live Writer files on my old Microsoft computer.
Right.
So it's one of those things, and I wanted to have this record today while the feelings are still raw to be transparent. Because I'm not the first person in history to lose data.
Right.
And I suspect I'm not going to be the last.
I suspect that too.
But whenever there's a breach or a data loss, people tend to clam up. But I think maybe it's time to, be transparent about it. So if I can't serve as an example, let me be a warning. If you think you have your data all safe and secure, double check again.
Yeah.
Because this would have happened no matter what. Because there's, clearly they haven't heard of a thing called email or Google, right? They could see what's in the database. They can see what blog it's for.
Right.
They can see, they refer to my account as inactive, even though, how many posts did I put out in a month?
That's crazy.
Slow month is what, 80 or 90? Yeah. Clearly it's not inactive.
Right.
That's a bunk.
Right.
And the other thing they could do is just freaking Google me.
Right.
Right? Look me up on LinkedIn just for S&G. And I'll leave people to figure out what S&G means. One of the words is giggles. Look me up.
Yeah.
Find me on LinkedIn. I can be found.
Yeah.
And thanks to the recent breach at Experian, you can probably, get a mortgage in my name at this point. But it's not that hard. I mean,
yeah.
So here's an enlightening example. So I posted on the podcast group I mentioned earlier this morning. Here's an example of awesome customer service. And I want to give a big shout out to podcastwebsites.com. Huge shout out. Huge with a Y. Shout out to podcastwebsites.com because I posted on the podcast group and their community rep / support person, she instant messaged me right away. I hope it's not us. I spoke to some of our engineers and everything's fine.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what the other company should have done.
Yeah.
And granted, podcast websites is a bit smaller than ClearDB.
Yeah.
Though I would imagine if you're on ClearDB, I would reevaluate your decision. And for God's sake, make sure they know how to reach you.
Yeah.
And in fact, maybe call them up today and say, hey, everything okay? And then if they say yes, then say, are you sure? Are you sure everything's okay?
I'm laughing with you, Frank.
What?
I'm laughing with you.
I have to laugh because if I laugh, I mean, what good is crying going to do over this, right? I mean, it's one of those things where maybe this is the best time for this to happen.
Well,
right after 9/11, right after the year anniversary of getting riffed. It's in the cosmic scheme of things, this sucks for sure.
Absolutely.
But I have my health.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm actually healthier now than I was a year ago.
Yeah.
And I have data to prove that. I don't know. Maybe Fitbit stores their stuff in ClearDB, so I don't know. So if you work from Fitbit, maybe you should get your stuff backed up.
Has Fitbit paid their bill?
They couldn't find Fitbit, so I don't know.
I'm sorry.
No, it has to be laughed at.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's a comedy of errors on so many fronts, right? I accept my part in this, in that I don't know what I could have done differently. If anyone has any ideas,
I mean, you certainly were not aware of a lot of moving parts going on behind the curtain. I mean, to you, everything
Right.
looked good until yesterday.
Right. And maybe what I should have done is just do an export from WordPress. Just to cover all bases.
That's a pretty good thought. I mean, I know you can do that, right? You can dump everything.
You can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is my blog has so much data in it. It's kind of it takes a while. In fact, I tried it a few times a while back, and maybe I should look for those XML files or whatever the format is.
Yeah.
Because everything, all the 9/11 stuff, that's safe, actually. Anything that was actually stored in Azure and only Azure is perfectly fine.
Okay.
So if you go to franksworld.com/WTC, I think it's the only part of the site that actually works.
Wow. Okay.
So that's still there.
That's good.
And I've always been kind of somewhat paranoid about my digital photos, going back from when I first got a digital camera in 98. Yeah. So I have multiple copies of it. And I always thought, well, maybe I'm being silly. And then this happens. And I'm like, maybe I'm not being silly enough.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say, keep being silly.
Or get sillier, man. I mean, it's just, I mean, that's the only thing I can think of that I could do differently. Some guy on Facebook, there's always one, right? Kind of said, well, you should have known this because this was a third-party transaction, and you should have known you're doing. No, I didn't. Like, if I had known I was dealing not with just Azure, I was dealing with Azure and ClearDB,
Right.
because the databases are sitting in Microsoft data centers, as far as I could tell.
Huh.
So it just seemed like rather than building out their own, they just outsourced it just to get something up running quick. Now, Microsoft has, in the years since, kind of built out a purely in Azure MySQL storage solution.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't know, WordPress basically is backended by MySQL, and you have no say in that.
Right.
But so it's definitely been. I'm going to use this as an opportunity.
Yeah.
To make things better, not just for me or for my website, but just so people can know. And I did the same thing when I got Rift. I'm going to make this an opportunity to be a better person.
Well, Frank, that's one of the things that I love about you, and I think everybody that listens to you or reads your writing gets that.
Or has read my writing, right?
It's not today, but soon. Everybody gets that. You're just that type of guy. I mean, you've always been about helping people. I think that's why we clicked when we met a dozen years ago, is we were both very interested in helping others, mainly because we've been helped ourselves. And, we're not, I keep telling people, we're not self-taught, man. We're community taught. And,
right.
This is another one of those instances where I have no doubt, Frank, we've been friends for a dozen years. I've seen you go up and down. This isn't going to stop you. You've been, like you said earlier, you've been through way worse. Right. And you'll get the site back up. You'll get all of your data back in there. It may be more or less work, but it'll happen. And, it gives us an opportunity to do this show and tell people, don't assume. And it's very easy to assume. I mean, it was from the way you described the setup. And like you said, unless you were paying attention, let me ask you this. Here's a for instance, anybody sitting out there judging Frank right now, when's the last time you read every single word in an end user license agreement before clicking the button? Okay, right. Now, what have you read any end user license agreements end to end? When's the last time you saw a change in terms of service and read those end to end? Have you ever done that? And it's very easy to sit back and go, well, Frank, you should have known better. And it's like, Frank was setting up his WordPress website. You were in the middle. I know exactly where your mind was. You were in the middle of figuring out, how do I get it from the old platform to the new? What are the hoops I have to jump through? How long is this going to take? Am I going to be down in the middle of it? That's what any normal developer would be thinking about. So, yeah, we live in that kind of world, and you're right. It was a comedy of errors. Things, the left hand didn't know what the right was doing. They could have solved it if they paid a little more attention. Hopefully, ClearDB.
Well, it's not like you don't get notifications when you log in Azure.
Well, yeah.
It's not like Azure doesn't have your email address.
Right.
Right. And maybe that was a Microsoft privacy thing. You know, they didn't want to share that. Who knows?
Yeah, could be.
But I mean, part of this is, and I'm going to keep pressing on Azure support, because I don't blame Microsoft so much as I do blame ClearDB. ClearDB is the one that pulled the trigger. And there's got to be a better policy here. Or just, you know what? That's what I don't get, right? How could you not pay the bill on a free service and be dinged for not paying the bill? That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, that's the thing that like blows my mind.
I'm confused by that too.
Like, so how many other free things do I have?
Right.
They're going to blow up in my face any day now.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the mindset I'm in now. It's like, well, how many other things do I think that are perfectly fine, but are going to go upside down?
Yeah, I don't blame you for being paranoid about it, Frank. I don't. I don't think you are being paranoid at this point. It happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely insane, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, we're on the show, you know, big theme is, you know, data is the new oil, data is the new raw resource. You know, maybe oil is not the right analogy, right? Because oil can't disappear overnight. I mean, I guess refinery could burn down.
Right.
Maybe it's more like food, where it's perishable. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
I mean, it's just. That's why I wanted to record. It wasn't just to bash ClearDB for their incompetence, inability to use a search engine or send an email. It's not just, you know, kind of Microsoft not thinking through the consequences of making things too easy.
Right.
It's not just me, you know, not having an additional backup, you know, just in case. But again, I think one of the appeals, and having been in a position where I had to sell cloud solutions to people who were on premises, one of the big selling points of the cloud is you don't have to worry about these things.
That is exactly right. And I was sharing with Christy earlier your dilemma. And she said, well, she asked that question. She's like, well, you know, what about backups? And I said, that's one of the selling points is you don't have to worry about that. They take care of all of it. And she asked the next logical, you know, question.
Right.
Where are the backups? And the answer is, well, they deleted those too.
Right. You can't, I mean, so even though technically the backup problem is solved, the policy the ineffective policies and incompetence of bureaucracy is still a problem.
You know, there's a line at the end of Star Trek 4 that I often quote. It's they're trying to figure out, you know, what their next ship's going to be because they've destroyed the Enterprise in Star Trek 3. And Bones makes this statement, and I don't know if I'll get it right or not, but it goes something like this. He says the bureaucratic mindset is the only constant in the universe.
That's so true.
And you know, when you think about it from a business perspective, right? The account is inactive. This is the communication you've heard from them. You're not making these words up. In their estimation, from what they can see, they've marked your account as inactive, although there's ample evidence it's not inactive. They've decided that it is. And maybe they keep sending emails out into the ether saying, as the utilities would here, right? I haven't paid my phone bill. I haven't paid my electric bill. We're going to turn it off if you don't pay the bill. Maybe they've been doing that for weeks or months. And they don't get a response from you, Frank. You're not answering their email.
Right. Well, you can't. It's an existential question, right? You can't answer something you never saw.
Right.
You know, if I had the ability to see things I never saw, I love you, Andy, but I wouldn't be recording a podcast. You and I would be chilling out on a yacht somewhere. I'd be working the tables in Vegas, or you know, starting a hedge fund. You know, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. No, I hear
I
you.
could see the future or see things that were not outside of my ability to see. I mean, you know, this would be a moot point.
Yeah. And what does get me though about that, and I mean we can throw blame back and forth, but the idea of deleting the backups just kills me. It's like what is it exactly that you gained? I could see turning off the account. In fact, that might be a really good way to send that last message prior to, deleting the account. Go in and change the password.
Well,
Something,
here's what makes it
anything.
even more incompetent on ClearDB's end. They
Yeah.
did that last year.
Oh, really?
Right. So last year, maybe I didn't explain this right, but so last year, site just stopped working, right? And I tried my normal like reboot, turn it on, turn it off again thing. Didn't work.
Right.
Called their support. Support said, "Oh, you haven't paid." I'm like, didn't know I had to pay for a free service.
Right.
And then, long story short, I got to the third tier support person. He goes, "Oh yeah, they got a little aggressive in terms of flagging a lot of Azure accounts that should never have been flagged." And, you're exempt from that because you're Azure and this and this. And it's like, you release the lock on your account and, you're fine. I'm like, so do I have to pay anything? He's like, no, because it's a free account.
Interesting.
And I'm like, so for the VP of finance to just fling that in my face, I'm like, and we're not talking about a tremendous amount of money here. I mean, it's like $10 a month. To get the data back, I'd gladly pay that, going back 2 years. Although paying for a free service seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But I mean that's kind of the thing. I mean, the data is still, even though we think of it as a natural resource, it's not like something. I mean, it can disappear in an instant.
Absolutely.
Despite the advances in technology and backups, because it just takes an idiot or a bureaucratic policy to flip the wrong switch and shoot all the backups too. I mean, it's just, and I think that's really the lesson. I mean, that's the lesson I learned. It's like, don't make assumptions.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't, Prince had a saying where it's basically, if you don't own the masters of your recordings, they own you.
Huh.
And that was in regards to his dispute with the record companies, where he didn't have the original recordings of his work. And I think that's true in this space, because if you don't control the backup, you don't have full transparency into the backup or the process around that. I mean, this is the big fear enterprises had when moving to the cloud, right? The data center is in somebody else's hands.
Yeah.
Now, as someone who did run an Outlook server and a web server on his own in his basement for a time, I know other people can do a better job at that. Because I had to work too, and I had to sleep and stuff like that. So, like, I know they do a better job of that. But there's always that kind of, well, it's not in my premises. I don't have that control.
Right.
If I had a backup in my house, I mean, someone would have to come in and, take it, or take a baseball bat to the hard drive for it to be gone, or malware, or any number of things. But to me, it's just the security blanket that is offered to be the cloud is not really as secure anymore to me.
Yeah.
It's like
That
the
makes
Holy
sense.
Roman Empire. It's neither holy nor Roman.
Well, it would be another part of that solution too. Would be, okay, that's fine if you want to manage the backups, but can you put them somewhere where I can make a copy to hold on to myself, since it's my data and all.
Right. So one of the things that I'm working on is that there's a new tab, and let's face it. I mean, these things are blogs are important, but they're shoemakers' children. How often do they go without shoes? And I don't log into the portal to work on my site. Apparently now I guess I have to do it daily, but I didn't look into it long, but now there's a new option to have a backup of the database inside Azure.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I ran that process off this morning as kind of a Hail Mary pass.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. But I'm operating under the assumption that it's gone.
Yeah.
I have the, maybe it's not been erased into the ether, but it's more like, that Lego project I spent 13 years building, and that somebody came in with a baseball bat and scattered most of the pieces to the four winds.
Oh, I did not know that story.
Which story?
About or is that a true story? About somebody destroying your Lego project?
No. That was an analogy.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I had not heard that.
Because I have two boys. One, as you know, one's 7, one's 2, and one loves to build complicated Lego things, and the other one, guess what he likes to do? So, I mean, that's an analogy that's fresh in my mind.
I hear that. I have 2 boys too, and it is exactly the same here. We see it in Minecraft. So, yeah, people will log out of the server, and the younger one will go in, and then the other 2 will log in, and they'll say, "Hey, what happened to all my stuff?"
So I think if there's anything you can learn from my, I don't want to say tragic example, because tragic is kind of overselling it. And this is kind of one of those things where it's like, am I overreacting or not?
I don't think you are, but I mean, if you are, I was overreacting when I read the email.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like in the scheme of things, you see people, the hurricanes and, my personal experience with 9/11. It's like, in the scheme of things, this is somewhere between stepping in dog poop and, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something else horrible. Nails on a chalkboard. I don't know. Right. Or maybe it's worse. I don't know. But I think I'm sorry, what?
I said, I hear you. And I love this approach, right? There's a lesson to be learned here. Let's share it. And
right. Maybe other people will discover things.
Exactly.
Maybe other people will, next time ClearDB just comes with a business proposal, it'll be like, you're not going to delete my backups, are you? And who knows? I mean, maybe they'll do the, ClearDB will do the right thing and somehow find it.
Yeah. The
backups. I don't know.
That would be nice.
I'm just dealing with my limited interaction with them because generally, over the course of 2.5 years or maybe 3 years now, I don't know. I've only had 2 interactions with the company, and both times the site was down.
Yeah.
And, I didn't realize right away until I was poking around in the Azure portal, the old Azure portal, like, oh, this is another site? That's weird.
Yeah.
So remember, kids, trust but verify.
Good advice.
Make sure you have backups of your backups and you control. You have to have at least one source of backup that you control.
Exactly.
Period. Like they say, make a backup in geographically distributed areas and all these different things. I would say add to that zones of control.
It's a good thought, Frank.
Don't just have a backup in the cloud. Have a backup in the cloud and on premises. Have a backup in the cloud. And if you have to have backup in the cloud, I mean, what I'm going to do now, from now on, when the blog gets completely rebooted, I'm going to do a daily, maybe I'll see if I can automate it, but do a daily dump, a blog ML dump, put one in SkyDrive, put one in Dropbox, put one on iCloud, G Drive,
Yeah.
I mean, that way it would have to be something catastrophic that could take it out. But I'm sure it's always the thing you don't see coming.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I've told you this, but most of my important stuff is in a box folder that is stored on my local drive inside of the Dropbox folder. So it's going to both clouds.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant.
It wasn't my idea. Someone said that, and I had the same reaction. I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. So, like when I'm writing, goodness gracious, man, I don't want to lose that. Anyway, you got to go do your call.
I have to go to that. Typing. So
you need to go do your call.
Let me do a quick outro. So we've seen examples of good customer service and bad customer service. And if you even thinking about doing a podcast, check out podcastwebsites.com. And we have a coupon code that you'll get a discount with them, and then gives us a little bit of thing too to help us keep the show going. Because good thing our database, Andy, for this show is not in ClearDB.
That is a good thing, Frank.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Don't just listen, become a data driver by going to datadriven.tv to sign up to join the community, access to special events, tips and tricks, and more. Sign up today at datadriven.tv.